The Violet Guardian. The morning mist clung to the Whisperwood Valley like silk draped over emerald shoulders, and Mira Celine moved through it like a living shadow, her bare feet making no sound on the moss-covered ground, her violet-tinged skin catching fragments of early light filtering through the canopy above. She paused beside a cluster of moonbell flowers, their petals still closed against the dawn, and pressed 2 fingers gently to the stem, feeling the pulse of life within, her own 2 violet eyes half closed in concentration as she listened to what the forest was telling her. "Not yet," she whispered, her 5 fingers withdrawing carefully. "Bloom when you're ready." Mira had lived alone in this hidden valley for 5 years now, ever since she'd fled the village that feared her unusual appearance and the strange way animals seemed to understand her, seemed to trust her without hesitation. Her arms bore faint scars from learning to climb, to hunt, to survive, and her 2 legs had grown strong from running through the undergrowth, leaping across streams, dancing with the wind itself. She wore clothes woven from plant fibers she'd prepared herself, dyed in shades of green and brown that let her disappear into the landscape whenever strangers approached, which was rare but not impossible. The valley was her sanctuary, protected by steep cliffs on 3 sides and dense, almost impenetrable forest on the 4th, and most travelers who glimpsed it from above assumed it was just another stretch of wilderness, not worth the difficult descent. But today, something felt different. Mira's head tilted, her long hair the color of midnight with violet highlights catching on a breeze that shouldn't exist in this sheltered place, and she heard it. Footsteps, clumsy and heavy, breaking twigs and disturbing the natural rhythm of the forest. Her 2 hands moved instinctively to the knife at her belt, not a weapon of aggression but one of protection, and she melted into the shadows behind a massive oak tree, its trunk wide enough to hide her slender frame completely, through a gap in the foliage. She saw him a man maybe in his late 20s, with tousled brown hair and clothes that marked him as someone from the civilized world. Sturdy hiking boots, a weather-worn jacket, and a camera bag slung across his shoulders, its strap cutting diagonally across his chest. His 2 arms moved carefully as he pushed aside branches, and his 2 legs navigated the uneven ground with the awkwardness of someone unused to true wilderness, though he moved with a gentle carefulness that surprised her. He had 2 bright hazel eyes that seemed to take in everything with wonder, rather than fear, and as she watched, he knelt beside a rare ghost orchid, pulling out his camera with reverent slowness. "Incredible," he breathed, and Mira found herself leaning forward slightly. Curious despite her caution, the man, Theo Ashford, though she didn't know his name yet, had been hiking for 3 days, following rumors of an untouched valley where nature still thrived without human interference, where flowers bloomed that existed nowhere else in the world. His 5 fingers adjusted the camera settings with practiced ease, and he began photographing the orchid from multiple angles, never touching it, never disturbing the delicate root system, just capturing its beauty and moving on. This small act of respect made something soften in Mira's chest. Though she remained hidden, Theo stood and stretched, his back probably aching from the climb down the cliff face he'd rappelled earlier that morning, risking his safety just to see what existed in this forgotten place. "Hello?" he called out suddenly, making Mira freeze. "I know someone lives here. I saw smoke from a fire yesterday evening." His voice carried a warmth that made her want to trust him. But trust was something she'd learned to guard carefully, like the rare seeds she collected and planted in secret gardens throughout the valley. "I'm not here to disturb anything," Theo continued, turning slowly as if he could sense her presence nearby. "I'm just a photographer. I document endangered ecosystems. My name is Theo." Mira pressed herself flatter against the oak tree, her violet skin blending with the shadows dappled across the bark, and she watched him wait for several long minutes before he sighed and continued walking. But she followed. She moved through the forest like water flowing around stones, silent and fluid, keeping him in sight as he explored her valley with eyes full of genuine appreciation, stopping to photograph a family of deer that should have fled from a human, but seemed as curious about him as he was about them. When he reached the waterfall, her waterfall, the heart of the valley where rainbow mist danced in the afternoon light, he sat down on a flat rock and simply stared, not reaching for his camera at all, just experiencing the moment with 2 eyes that held no greed, no desire to possess, only wonder. And Mira realized, as she watched him from behind a curtain of willow branches, that maybe, just maybe, the forest had brought him here for a reason, that perhaps the loneliness she'd grown accustomed to didn't have to be permanent. But trust, she reminded herself. Trust had to be earned, so she stayed hidden, watching, waiting, her heart beating a steady rhythm against her ribs as Theo sat by her waterfall, his presence somehow not feeling like an intrusion at all, but rather like the first note of a song she'd been waiting 5 years to hear. Colors of Trust. 3 days passed like pages turning in a story Mira couldn't stop reading, and each day she watched Theo move through her valley with the same gentle reverence, never taking more than photographs, never leaving anything behind but footprints that the moss would swallow within hours. On the 4th morning, she made a decision. Theo was photographing a cluster of silverleaf ferns when he heard a sound behind him. Deliberate this time, meant to be heard. And he turned slowly, his 2 hands raised to show he meant no harm, and there she stood. Mira emerged from behind a wall of flowering vines, and Theo's breath caught in his throat because she was unlike anyone he'd ever seen, her skin carrying that distinctive violet undertone that made her look like she'd been painted by twilight itself, her 2 eyes watching him with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in his life. "You've been following me," Theo said softly, not accusatory, just stating a fact. "This is my home," Mira replied, her voice rusty from disuse but clear. "You're the visitor." "I know." He lowered his 2 arms slowly. "And I'm grateful you've let me stay, even if you've been doing it from a distance." A small smile tugged at her lips, surprising them both. "You don't photograph the animals," she observed, taking 1 step closer, her bare feet soundless on the forest floor. "I do sometimes," Theo admitted, "but only when they're comfortable. Only when my presence doesn't disturb their natural behavior. The landscape and plants are easier subjects, they don't run away." "Everything runs away," Mira said quietly. "Eventually." Something in her tone made Theo's chest ache with understanding. "Not everything," he said, and he sat down right where he stood, making himself smaller, less threatening. "I'd like to learn about this place if you'd be willing to teach me." Mira studied him for a long moment, her 5 fingers absently touching the bark of a nearby tree as if asking its opinion, and then she nodded once. "Follow me," she said, "but step where I step. The forest has secrets that can hurt those who don't respect them." Over the next week, Mira showed Theo wonders he'd only dreamed about. She led him to a grove where bioluminescent mushrooms grew in spirals up ancient trees, their soft blue-green light turning the night into something from a fairy tale. And Theo's 2 eyes went wide with childlike joy as he photographed the phenomenon without using flash. Letting his camera soak in the natural luminescence, they respond to vibration, Mira explained, and she began to hum, a low melodic sound that made the mushrooms pulse brighter in rhythm with her voice. Theo watched her face as she sang to the forest, the violet tones in her skin seeming to echo the mushroom light. And he felt something shift in his chest, something that had nothing to do with botanical curiosity and everything to do with the woman before him. "Your turn," Mira said, glancing at him with a challenge in her smile. "I can't sing," Theo protested, but she raised an eyebrow. "Everyone can sing," she countered. "The forest doesn't judge pitch, only intention," so Theo hummed, awkward and uncertain at first, but the mushrooms responded to him too, their light dancing to his vibration, and Mira laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was so unexpected and genuine that Theo found himself laughing too. They sat in the glowing grove until dawn began to gray the sky, sharing stories in hushed voices. Mira told him about the village that had cast her out, about the way her unusual appearance had made people afraid, about the grandmother who'd loved her anyway and taught her that different didn't mean wrong. "Just rare like these flowers," Mira said, gesturing to a patch of midnight blooms that only opened in darkness. "They're not broken for refusing to follow the sun. They're just listening to a different rhythm." Theo told her about growing up in a city where nature existed only in parks, about the first time he'd seen a truly wild place and realized he'd been holding his breath his entire life without knowing it. "I was 12, he said, his 5 fingers tracing patterns in the dirt. "My uncle took me to the mountains and I saw a wolf just for a moment, and it looked at me like I was the animal in its territory, and something in me woke up." "What?" Mira asked, leaning closer. "The understanding that I was small," Theo said, "and that being small in the face of something bigger and wilder wasn't frightening. It was freeing." Their eyes met in the mushroom light, and for a moment neither of them spoke, as days became weeks. Their companionship deepened. Mira taught Theo which berries were safe to eat and which would make him violently ill, how to read the weather and the way birds flew, how to move through the forest without leaving a trace. And in return, Theo showed her his photographs, the way he captured moments of beauty and preserved them without possession. "It's like you're collecting memories for the world," Mira observed, scrolling through images on his camera screen with careful fingers. "That's exactly it," Theo said, surprised by her insight. "So people who can't come here can still know this place exists, can still care about protecting it." One afternoon, Mira took him to her most secret place, a natural pool fed by an underground spring, its water so clear it looked like liquid glass, surrounded by flowers in shades of purple that matched her skin tone perfectly. "I planted these," she admitted, running her 2 hands over the petals. "After I first arrived, they're the only thing from my grandmother's garden that survived the journey." "They're beautiful," Theo said. "Like you." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and Mira's 2 eyes widened, a flush of deeper violet spreading across her cheeks. Theo started to apologize, but Mira shook her head. "No one's called me beautiful before," she said quietly. "They usually stop at strange." "Then they weren't looking properly," Theo replied, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. Mira sat down at the pool's edge, her 2 legs dangling in the water, and after a moment's hesitation, Theo joined her, their shoulders not quite touching but close enough that he could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "Why did you really come here?" Mira asked. Theo was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I was tired of documenting places that were disappearing," he said honestly. "I wanted to find somewhere that was still thriving, still wild, still possible. And then I heard rumors about this valley, and I had to see if hope still existed somewhere. And does it?" Mira asked, turning to look at him. "Yes," Theo said, meeting her gaze. "It does." Their 5 fingers on each hand were inches apart on the smooth stone, and slowly, carefully, Mira moved her hand until her pinky finger brushed against his, the smallest of contacts, but it sent electricity racing up both their 2 arms. Neither of them pulled away. When hearts speak, the night of the meteor shower, Mira found Theo setting up his camera near the waterfall, his 2 hands working quickly to adjust the tripod as the sky began to darken into deep velvet, scattered with emerging stars. "You'll want to be higher," Mira said, making him jump slightly. "There's a clearing on the ridge that has a perfect view of the eastern sky." "Lead the way," Theo said with a grin that had become familiar and precious to her over the past 3 weeks. They climbed in comfortable silence, Mira's 2 legs navigating the steep path with ease while Theo followed, his breathing heavier but determined, and when they reached the clearing, he understood why she'd brought him here. The sky opened up above them like a dome of infinite possibility, the Milky Way visible in a ribbon of light that city dwellers could only imagine. And as they sat down on the sun-warmed grass, the first meteor streaked across the darkness. "Make a wish," Mira said automatically, then felt foolish for the childish impulse already did, Theo replied, and something in his voice made her 2 eyes seek his face in the starlight. They watched in silence as the sky began to rain light, meteors burning across the atmosphere in brilliant flashes that left ghost trails on their retinas, nature's fireworks celebrating nothing and everything all at once. "Theo," Mira said softly, "why haven't you left yet?" He'd been planning to stay only a week, maybe 2, but a month had passed and he'd shown no signs of departure, his camera full of thousands of images but his feet still firmly planted in her valley. "Because I'm not finished," Theo said, but they both knew that wasn't the full truth. "Finished photographing?" Mira pressed. "Finished understanding what I found here," Theo said, turning to face her fully. "I came looking for a place, Mira, but I found something I wasn't expecting." "What?" she whispered, though her heart was already beating faster. "Already knowing you," he said simply. "I found you, and now everything else feels incomplete without you in it." A meteor shower blazed above them, but Mira only saw Theo's 2 eyes, warm and honest and full of something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. "I'm not like other people," Mira said, falling back on the defense she'd used for years. "I don't fit in your world. My world is wherever I choose to be," Theo countered. "And I choose here with you if you'll have me." Mira's breath caught, and slowly, trembling slightly, she reached out her right hand, all 5 fingers extended in offering. Theo took it, his own 5 fingers interlacing with hers, and the moment their palms pressed together fully, something extraordinary happened. The world went silent. not the absence of sound, but rather the falling away of everything except the two of them. And Mira gasped because she could feel it, Theo's heartbeat. Not just the pulse in his wrist, but the actual rhythm of his heart, and it was beating in perfect synchronization with her own lub-dub, lub-dub, lub-dub two hearts. One rhythm, impossible and undeniable. Theo felt it too, his two eyes widening in wonder, his free hand moving to his chest as if to confirm what he was experiencing. "Do you feel that?" Mira breathed. "Your heartbeat," Theo said, awed. "It matches mine exactly." They sat frozen, two hands clasped between them, two sets of eyes locked together, and the meteor shower continued above, but neither of them noticed anymore, because the universe had narrowed to this single point of connection. "How is this possible?" Mira whispered. "I don't know," Theo admitted. "But I don't want it to stop." Carefully, as if afraid to break the spell, Theo raised his other hand and cupped Mira's cheek, his thumb tracing the distinctive violet tones of her skin with infinite gentleness. "You're extraordinary," he said. In every way, Mira leaned into his touch, her own free hand coming up to rest against his chest where she could feel, actually feel, his heart beating in time with her own. A synchronization that should have been impossible but felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. "I've been alone for so long," Mira confessed, her voice breaking slightly. "I forgot what it felt like to be seen." "You're not alone anymore," Theo promised. "Not unless you want to be." "I don't," Mira said, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. "I don't want to be alone anymore." Theo pulled her closer, his two arms wrapping around her slender frame, and Mira melted into the embrace, her own two arms circling his waist as she pressed her ear against his chest and listened to the heart that beat in perfect rhythm with her own. They stayed like that for hours, wrapped in each other under the meteor shower, feeling the synchronization of their heartbeats create a bubble of stillness around them, where time seemed to move differently, where the rest of the world faded into insignificance. When Mira finally pulled back enough to look at Theo's face, she found him watching her with such tenderness that tears pricked her violet eyes. "What are we?" she asked, needing to understand this connection. "I don't know what to call it," Theo said honestly, his 5 fingers tracing patterns on her back. "But it feels like coming home." "I've never had a home," Mira admitted. "Not really, just places I survived." "Then let's make one," Theo said. "Together, here in your valley, a home built on choice instead of circumstance." "You'd stay?" Mira asked, hope and fear warring in her voice. "Permanently? I'd stay forever if you'd let me," Theo said. "I'd stay until the forest reclaims us both and we become part of the earth we're sitting on." Mira laughed through her tears, and she kissed him. It was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning the shape of each other's lips, but then it deepened into something more urgent, more necessary, years of loneliness melting away and the warmth of connection finally found. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, their foreheads pressed together, and their hearts still beating in impossible synchronization, Mira smiled. "I think the forest brought you to me," she whispered. "Then I'm grateful for every tree and flower and stone that guided my path," Theo replied, kissing her again, softer this time. Reverent above them, the meteor shower reached its peak, the sky on fire with shooting stars, but Mira and Theo saw none of it, too lost in each other to notice anything beyond the miracle of matched heartbeats and the promise of tomorrow, wrapped in each other's two arms. The storm's test. The smoke came 3 days after the meteor shower, distant at first. Just a haze on the western horizon that Mira spotted from her morning perch in the tallest tree, but by afternoon it had grown into an ominous gray wall that turned the sunlight sickly and yellow. "Fire," Mira said, dropping from the tree with practiced grace, landing beside Theo, who'd been sketching the waterfall. "We need to prepare." Theo's two eyes went wide with concern as he looked at the approaching smoke, his 5 fingers already packing away his art supplies. "How far?" he asked. 2 days, maybe," Mira calculated, tasting the air, reading the wind patterns her grandmother had taught her to interpret. "Depends on the wind, but it's big, and it's heading this way." They'd spent the past 72 hours in a bubble of happiness, learning each other's bodies and hearts in equal measure, Mira showing Theo the ways her violet skin flushed darker when he kissed her neck, Theo discovering that she hummed unconsciously when she was content, their hearts continuing to synchronize whenever they touched, a phenomenon they'd stopped questioning and simply accepted as their unique truth. But now reality crashed back in the form of approaching disaster. "We need to evacuate," Theo said immediately, his photographer's instinct to document overridden by his human instinct to survive. I can call for help, get helicopters. No, Mira cut him off, her two hands already moving through her gathered supplies, sorting what would be needed. The animals can't evacuate. The ancient trees can't be airlifted. This valley has survived for thousands of years, and I won't abandon it now. Mira, Theo caught her shoulders gently, forcing her to look at him with her two violet eyes. You can't fight a wildfire. Watch me, she said, and the fierce determination in her voice reminded him that she'd survived alone here for 5 years, that she was stronger than her slender frame suggested. Theo looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. Tell me what to do, he said simply. Relief flooded Mira's features. You'll help? She asked. I love you, Theo said. The words simple and true. And I love this place because you love it, so yes, I'll help. We'll fight for it together. It was the first time either of them had said the words out loud, and Mira's breath caught. I love you too, she whispered, then shook herself. But we can confess our feelings after we survive. Come on. They worked like a machine with two parts, perfectly synchronized. Mira knew the valley's every secret, every underground spring and water source, every natural firebreak and stone clearing, and she directed Theo with the precision of a general deploying troops. There's a creek that feeds into the eastern meadow, she explained as they ran, their two sets of legs covering ground quickly. We need to dam it here and here, create a flood barrier that the fire can't cross. Theo's two arms ached as he moved stones and logs under Mira's direction, building crude but effective dams that would redirect water into natural channels, creating wet zones around the most vulnerable areas. His 5 fingers blistered and bled, but he didn't stop. Mira worked beside him, her violet skin streaked with mud and ash as the smoke grew thicker, her own 2 hands just as damaged as his. And several times they had to stop and press their foreheads together, letting their synchronized heartbeats calm the panic that threatened to overwhelm them. We can do this, Theo would murmur. Together, Mira would respond. They worked through the night, the sky glowing orange on the western ridge as the fire crowned in the distant trees. And as dawn broke gray and choking, they faced their biggest challenge. The wind shifted. No, Mira breathed, watching the smoke curl back toward them from a new direction. No. That means the fire's going to jump the western ridge, Theo finished. Understanding the geography now after weeks of exploration, it'll come straight down into the heart of the valley. Mira's 2 eyes filled with desperate tears. The grove, she said. The ancient grove where my grandmother's flowers grow. Where the oldest trees in the valley stand, Theo. If that burns, it won't, Theo said firmly, taking her face in his 2 hands. Listen to me, we're going to save it. Do you trust me? With my life, Mira said without hesitation. Then here's what we're going to do, Theo said. And he explained his plan. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was their only chance. They would create a controlled backburn, deliberately setting fire to the vegetation between the approaching wildfire and the ancient grove, starving the main fire of fuel when it arrived. And if they timed it wrong, if the wind shifted again, they would trap themselves in an inferno of their own making. But Mira listened and nodded. Let's do it, she said. They gathered the animals first, Mira's strange connection to the forest creatures allowing her to guide them to safety in the caves near the waterfall. Deer and rabbits and foxes following her 2-legged stride without fear, trusting her completely. Then they set their fires. Theo's 2 hands shook as he struck the flint, watching the grass catch and spread, and beside him Mira did the same. Their line of controlled flame spreading across their chosen barrier zone run. Theo shouted as the backburn started racing faster than anticipated. They ran, their 2 sets of legs pumping desperately, the heat chasing them like a living thing, and twice Theo stumbled. His photographer's boots not meant for this kind of terrain, but each time Mira's 5 fingers grabbed his arm and hauled him forward with surprising strength. They dove into the pool at the ancient grove just as the flames roared overhead, their 2 bodies submerging completely as fire met fire above them, the backburn and the wildfire colliding in a fury of heat that sucked the oxygen from the air under the water. Their hearts beat together, lub-dub, lub-dub, synchronized and strong, giving them courage to hold their breath just a little longer, to survive just one more moment. When they finally surfaced, gasping and coughing, the world was transformed. Blackened earth surrounded them, smoke still rising from countless small fires, but the ancient grove stood untouched, protected by the pool and the fire break they'd created. And as Mira pulled herself onto the bank, her two arms shaking with exhaustion, she saw that the oldest trees had survived. "We did it," she sobbed, collapsing onto the ash-covered ground. Theo crawled to her, his own two legs barely supporting him, and pulled her into his two arms, both of them covered in soot and mud and water. Their clothes singed and their skin marked with minor burns, but alive together. "Victorious, your valley survived," Theo said into her hair. "Our valley," Mira corrected, pulling back to look at him with her two violet eyes bright with tears and ash. "It's ours now. You fought for it. You bled for it. This is your home, too." Around them, the forest began its ancient process of recovery, already the resilient undergrowth stirring. The valley that had survived for millennia preparing to survive another 1,000 years, and at its heart, two people held each other with two arms each, their hearts beating as one, their love tested by fire and proven unbreakable. Where two worlds bloomed 3 months after the fire, the valley was barely recognizable, not because it was destroyed, but because it was being reborn more vibrantly than ever before. Mira walked through meadows now carpeted with wildflowers, the ash having enriched the soil in ways that would take years to fully manifest. And beside her walked Theo, his two hands carrying lumber for their latest project. A little more to the left, Mira directed, her violet skin glowing with health in the morning sunshine, her two legs planted firmly as she pointed with 5 fingers. "We want the porch to face the waterfall directly." They were building a home, not just a shelter, but a real home, constructed from fallen timber and stone gathered from the valley itself, positioned in a clearing near the waterfall that Mira had always loved, but never thought she'd share with anyone. Theo had proven remarkably handy with construction, his photographer's eye for composition, translating well into architectural planning, and together they'd designed a small cabin that seemed to grow out of the landscape rather than impose upon it. "How's this?" Theo asked, setting down the beam and stepping back to survey their progress. "Perfect," Mira said, then grinned. "You're getting good at this." "I have an excellent teacher," Theo replied, crossing to her and wrapping his two arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder as they both admired their half-built home. Their hearts synchronized immediately, as they always did when they touched. That mysterious connection that had never faded, if anything growing stronger with each passing day. "I talked to my editor yesterday," Theo said carefully. "She wants to publish my photo series on the valley." Mira tensed slightly, "And?" she asked. "And I told her only if we can do it in partnership with conservation groups," Theo explained, his 5 fingers tracing idle patterns on her arm. "Set up protections for this place. Make sure it stays wild, no development, no tourism, just preservation. You'd do that?" Mira asked, turning in his two arms to face him with her two violet eyes. "It's your home," Theo said. "I won't be the reason it gets destroyed by people seeking what we found here." "Our home," Mira corrected, just as she had after the fire. "And yes, let's protect it. Together." They kissed, long and slow and sweet, the taste of partnership and promise on both their lips. Over the following weeks, the cabin took shape, its walls rising sturdy and strong, its windows positioned to catch the dawn light and frame views of the waterfall. And every evening they would sit on the partially finished porch and watch the sunset, paint the valley in shades of gold and purple. "Tell me about your grandmother," Theo said one evening, Mira's head resting on his shoulder, his two arms around her. Mira smiled. Remembering, "She had violet skin like mine," she said, "though hers was deeper, like twilight instead of lavender. And she told me stories about women in our family going back generations, all of us different, all of us beautiful in ways that scared people who couldn't understand." "I wish I could have met her," Theo said. "She would have loved you," Mira replied. "She always said I'd find someone who saw colors instead of strangeness." "I see you," Theo murmured, kissing the top of her head, "all of you, and you're the most beautiful thing I've ever encountered." Mira turned and kissed him properly, her 5 fingers tangling in his hair, their hearts beating their familiar synchronized rhythm as passion flared between them, and they made love there on the unfinished porch under a sky full of stars, their two bodies learning each other's rhythms in ways that went beyond heartbeats, creating new synchronizations with every touch and gasp and whispered declaration afterward. Wrapped in blankets and each other's two arms, they planned their future. "I want to document the valley's recovery," Theo said. "Create a long-term photographic study of how the forest heals. It could be important research. I want to expand the gardens, Mira added. Plant more of my grandmother's flowers, create corridors for the animals, make this place even more alive. We could do both, Theo suggested. Your hands in the earth, mine behind the camera, telling the valley's story together. Yes, Mira agreed. Together, always. The cabin was finished by the first snowfall, its roof tight and its hearth warm, and the night they spent their first full night inside. Theo produced a small wooden box he'd been carving in secret for weeks. Mira Celine, he said, kneeling before her with both knees on the floor they'd laid together, his two hands trembling slightly as he held out the box. I came to this valley looking for hope, and I found it in you. In your strength and your wildness and your heart that beats in time with mine. Mira's two violet eyes filled with tears as he opened the box to reveal a ring woven from strands of copper wire and inlaid with fragments of the purple flowers she'd planted. Will you marry me? Theo asked. Will you let me spend the rest of my life learning the rhythms of your heart, protecting your home, loving you in all the ways a person can be loved? Yes, Mira breathed, her 5 fingers shaking as she held out her left hand. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Theo slipped the ring onto her finger, and as he stood to kiss her, their hearts synchronized so perfectly that for a moment the whole valley seemed to hold its breath, the forest witnessing and approving this union between two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds. They married in the spring, surrounded by blooms in every color but especially purple, with only the animals as witnesses and the waterfall providing music. Mira wore flowers in her hair and a dress the color of new leaves, while Theo wore clothes he'd made himself from valley materials, both of them barefoot on the earth they'd chosen as their forever home. I vow to see you, Theo said, holding both her hands with his. Not just your beauty but your scars, not just your strength but your fears, and to love all of it equally. I vow to trust you, Mira replied, tears streaming down her violet cheeks. With my heart and my home and my whole self, to build a life where we both grow wild and free. They exchanged rings made of woven vines and kissed as husband and wife, their hearts beating in perfect synchronization, and around them the valley seemed to sing, birds calling and wind rushing and water falling in a symphony of natural approval that night, tangled together in their marriage bed. Mira whispered against Theo's chest where she could hear and feel his heart beating with hers. I never thought I'd have this, neither did I, Theo admitted, his 2 arms tightening around her. But now I can't imagine any other life. Promise me something, Mira said, propping herself up on her 2 elbows to look at him with serious 2 eyes. Anything, Theo vowed. Promise that even when we're old and gray, when our 2 legs don't work as well and our 5 fingers on each hand grow stiff, you'll still dance with me under the stars, I promise, Theo said, pulling her down for a kiss. I'll dance with you until the forest reclaims us both, until we become stories the trees tell to travelers who stumble into this hidden valley. Good. Mira smiled against his lips. Because I'm planning on forever. Forever sounds perfect, Theo agreed, and so they built their life day by day, season by season, year by year. Theo's photographs of the valley's recovery were published and helped establish protected status for the entire region, while Mira's gardens expanded into a network of carefully tended biodiversity that scientists came from around the world to study. They welcomed visitors occasionally, always supervised, always respectful, and sometimes they would see couples walk through the valley and stop by the waterfall, and those couples would later report feeling something inexplicable, a sense of peace and connection, as if the very air was charged with love. That's us, Mira would say, her violet skin now lined with age but still beautiful, still distinctive. Our love is in this place. Our heartbeats are in the rhythm of the waterfall. We're part of the forest now, Theo would agree, his own body marked by time, but his 2 eyes still bright with wonder when he looked at his wife. And the forest is part of us. They grew old together in their cabin by the waterfall, their synchronized heartbeats never faltering, and when one heart finally stilled, decades after their wedding day, the other followed within moments, unable to beat alone after so many years of perfect rhythm. The valley mourned them but also celebrated them, and where they were buried, together, under the oldest tree in the ancient grove, purple flowers bloomed year-round, even in winter, even in drought. Their roots intertwined so completely that no botanist could determine where one plant ended and another began. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the moon is full, people claim to hear 2 heartbeats echoing through the Whisperwood Valley. Lub-dub, Lub-dub, perfectly synchronized, eternally together. A love story written in the very bones of the earth, proving that some connections transcend the physical, that some bonds are written in the stars and the soil in the secret language of matched heartbeats. The world falls silent around them still. Even now, even always, their love endures, the end.